Good morning and welcome. Before we begin our service, let us take a moment to share in our stone ritual. I place a stone for our joys. One for our sorrows. And one for our intentions for the coming week.
The UUCT care team follows up with congregants who are experiencing joys or sorrows. The care team also addresses needs of congregants. The care team can be contacted by email at careteam@uutampa.org. And now to our service.
Hi, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa virtual service. Welcome if you came peacefully, and welcome if you came because you need to find peace. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
It's Wyatt and Michelle.
Look, we're doing like this like church, and Mom's holding a lighter.
We're going to light the chalice. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
It's lit. It's lit.
All right, set it down. Okay, now let's do our chalice lighting together, okay? Ready?
Yeah.
We light this chalice to
Yes.
celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind, the church of the helping hands. This is the church of the loving heart. For all these things and for each and every one of us, our chalice is lit.
Bye.
Bye.
Our reading is number 473 in our hymnal by James Villa Blake. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our greatest covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please join in singing number 1000, Morning Has Come. Open
Hi, my name is Erin Powers, and I serve the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa as the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth. And today I've got a story for you written by one of my colleagues, Jen Blosser. And this story is called Rainbows in the Windows. So somewhere in the world, there was a child and their grandparent sheltering in place. And they were really fed up. Perhaps a bit like you are sometimes. The novelty of being at home all the time and doing whatever they wanted had worn off for the child and the grandparent. And for the child, they felt so bored. And for the grandparent, it was less a feeling of boredom weighing them down, but rather a sense of hopelessness. They watched TV for hours, though how many hours remained a mystery. They had stopped keeping track of time, really. The days all blurred together, and they felt like they had been doing this for so long. And then one day, the child accidentally sat on the remote, and the TV accidentally turned off. And there was something new reflected back on the black screen of the powered down TV. The child and the grandparent turned around to look out the front window and find the source of this reflection. In the house across the road from them, there was a piece of paper taped in the window, and on that paper was a colorfully drawn rainbow. Well, this was something new, something unexpected and bright and cheery, and the child and grandparent turned to one another knowingly, grinning. In a flash, the child retrieved a sheet of paper and crayons and began to draw a rainbow, while the grandparent fetched tape. A moment later, they gazed upon their window with pride. Their rainbow shone back across the street, joyfully mirroring their neighbor's rainbow. Now what happened next was like magic. Every day, more colorful rainbows appeared in more windows, all up and down the street. The child and their grandparent gleefully drew rainbows for each window in their home, watching their neighbors do the same. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and all manner of other colors burst forth, seeming to shine through the windows, a cacophony of color. But the people didn't stop there. They continued to draw. Rainbows were taped to neighbors' doors, slipped into mailboxes. They were sent to care homes, to beloved elders who couldn't have visitors. They were left out for the delivery folks. People made rainbows to send to hospitals, scrawled with messages of gratitude and admiration for everyone working to help the sick, from the doctors and nurses to the custodial staff and maintenance workers. Stockers working hard in grocery stores found paper rainbows between cans of beans and corn, left waiting on the shelves where the toilet paper was sold out. Now families on solitary walks around the city go rainbow hunting. This child and their grandfather liked to do this, taking paper with them to write down all the places they see rainbows hanging. The empty school, the corner store, windows of brownstone homes, even hanging from balconies 15 stories up. They make a list of all the rainbows emerging, logging each place where the colors shine into the empty streets. And by now, you've probably figured out that this story really happened all over the world at the beginning of the pandemic. Folks came together in spirit while physically distanced to lovingly reassure each other with bright colors. The rainbows are beautiful, and to see them alone is a joy, but they carry with them a promise. The rainbows shine as a reminder of hope. We are in this together. The storm will end and we will come out the other side. And with that, our story ends.
Today's reading for meditation comes to us from Quaker educator and activist Parker Palmer, who writes about the nature of the soul. The soul is very tough, very resilient, very resourceful, very savvy. It knows how to survive in hard places where nothing else in us knows how to survive. Just like a wild animal survives through the winter in the deep woods, hardly anything to eat. That's one side of the soul. The other side of being a wild animal is that the soul is essentially shy. If we want to see a wild animal, we know that the last thing we should do is to run crashing through the woods, screaming for it to come out. And while that image is still with you, let me say I've been part of a number of support groups where people ran crashing through the woods, screaming for the soul to come out. And those are exactly the circumstances under which the soul flees further into the woods. What do? You want to see a wild animal? You walk into the woods quietly. You sit at the base of a tree. You breathe with the earth for an hour or two. And then maybe, eventually, that wild thing you seek will put in an appearance. You won't ask it to move to frame your photo better. You won't try to put a harness on it, get a job done for you. Just being in the presence of that wild thing is reward in itself.
Hello everyone. Now we're going to sing number 352, Find a Stillness. Find a stillness, hold the stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
Today, we welcome Reverend Heather Janiels as our guest speaker. The Reverend Janiels grew up in a nominally Catholic family in New Hampshire. She discovered Unitarian Universalism at the historic Arlington Street Church in Boston, where she was ordained in 2005. Heather served congregations first as a student in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where she met UUCT member Christine Smith, and was then called as the Associate Minister of Cedar Lane UU Church in 2005. In 2015, she became the parish minister of the Winchester Unitarian Society in Winchester, Massachusetts. Heather lives in the suburbs of Boston with two very spoiled pets. In her spare time, she has a hobby business of handmade soap making. Welcome, Reverend Janiels.
It is a joy to bring greetings to you this morning from my home in Woburn, Massachusetts. This virtual ministry is a gift, being able to be with you in worship while also being so far away. If you're unfamiliar with Woburn, a northwest suburb of Boston, it is a city made famous, or you might say infamous, by the movie A Civil Action. This was the place where local industries allowed chemicals to pollute the drinking water, and a lawyer, played by John Travolta in the film, fought on the citizens' behalf. I'd like to focus on other more positive points of familiarity. Where I live is rich with Unitarian Universalist history. As I often say to those who are new to Unitarian Universalism, as Salt Lake City is to Mormons, Boston is to Unitarian Universalists. I hope when this pandemic is over and it's easy to travel again, you will consider visiting us. It would be great to see you in person. And if the timing is right, you can join us for our occasional history tour. Coming of age classes from around the country visit Boston to see sites related to Universalist, Unitarian, and Unitarian Universalist history. Yet we locals often ignore these gifts all around us. So I've made a point to learn about what one friend jokingly calls the stations of the chalice in downtown Boston and share what I discover with others. If you were to go on such a tour, you would meet
Edward Everett Hale. This is his statue in the Boston Common. Along with serving as Unitarian minister, he was an author, remembered for the book A Man Without a Country. After serving in the parish, Hale then served as chaplain to the U.S. Senate. Once, when asked if he prayed for the senators, he famously replied, "No, I look at the senators and pray for the country." Humor aside, Hale used his position to promote a number of movements, such as conservation of forests in the White Mountains, educational equity for African Americans, and pacifism. Yet Hale also promoted direct action and service. As an author, he once wrote a short story about friends gathering for a funeral. Inspired by the transformative character of the deceased, they decided to found an organization in his memory, a Lend a Hand Society, defined by the motto, "Look up and not down, look forward and not back, look out and not in, lend a hand." Art became life when the short story inspired the formation of Lend a Hand chapters. While the chapters have mostly folded, to this day, there remains a Lend a Hand Society, providing financial resources to local residents struggling on the margins. Reverend Hale is just one Unitarian Universalist figure exemplifying James Vila Blake's words, "Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law." For there are the labors of the 54th Regiment, the second all-black regiment to serve in the Civil War, led by Unitarian Robert Gould Shaw. While the history is complicated, all risked, and some lost, their lives in pursuit of the end of slavery. This renowned memorial stands across the street from the Massachusetts State House, a grand public building designed by Unitarian Charles Bulfinch. I could go on.
I understand why we immerse our young people in these stories. While Unitarian Universalists together believe many things about life and death and the nature of the divine, one thing that binds us together is service, the commitment to lend a hand, the courage to use our voice and our vision to shape the world into a society embodying values of human dignity, justice, and peace. Blake wrote that service is our law. Perhaps one could call it our commandment. Yet I've seen Blake's covenant expressed in different ways. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. I've heard Unitarian Universalists affirm that service is our prayer. However we express it, tending to needs beyond our own is a foundational spiritual practice. So I celebrate that you've named service as your theme for this month. And as part of this focus, I invite you to join me in struggling with one element of service in this time of pandemic, the service of presence. When I try to illustrate offering presence, I often turn to the reading we shared as a meditation today by Parker Palmer, speaking to the nature of the soul. While direct service, providing tangible relief, such as working in a soup kitchen, is at the heart of the missional life of our congregations, I believe we are equally called to be present to one another for our human seasons of sorrow and rejoicing. To draw from Parker Palmer's image, we're called to quiet ourselves so we may create a safe space for another's most vulnerable and fearful self to emerge, their wild animal self. We offer our service of presence through pastoral care. We listen to another's story and simply hold that story with tenderness. We perform the act of showing up at bedsides and courtrooms and memorial services. We remember anniversaries and create rituals to give voice to that which must be named, but for which there are no words. Whatever people are navigating in their lives, we offer presence by demonstrating that while they must find their own way through, they are not alone. But in this time of social distancing, if we're to listen to another's story, it must be from behind a mask or over the phone. There are fewer places where we can safely show up in person, so we've turned to deathbed farewells by FaceTime and memorial services over Zoom. I applaud my colleagues who have created grief kits so families can light a candle and read a prayer at home. We recognize that some of the power of ritual rests in performing these acts in community. I know I'm not alone in struggling how to be present in this extended period of physical distance. This is the challenge I chose to consider and share with you this morning. And like many questions explored in preparation for the pulpit, in the end, I was led in a direction I did not anticipate. I've spent much of my time this summer considering how to not just survive, but thrive through this pandemic, as I know that there are many miles to go for us. One resource I discovered was an episode of the podcast Radio Lab. It moved me to conclude that it's not the mechanics of presence that are most important in this time, phone versus in person, by Zoom or by bedside, but the recognition that illness and quarantine are catalysts to spiritual change. Mindfulness about this innermost evolution and how we re-engage with the world can have profound effects. If you haven't heard Radio Lab, it's a program exploring the great curiosities of the world, often through the lens of science. In their recent episode, Dispatches from 1918, they explore accounts from the great influenza pandemic of that time. While the coronavirus pandemic has been challenging for so many, I at least console myself that unlike the influenza pandemic, we are not simultaneously engaged in a world war. Facing pressure from national leaders, newspapers of that time consciously decided to not publish much about the influenza pandemic, lest this news erode morale for the armed conflict. The idea of the government and media gaslighting a nation for political purposes is shocking, I know. Yet the simultaneous challenges of the war and the pandemic did impact one another. Radio Lab invites us to consider the Treaty of Versailles, the formal conclusion of the war.
Two world leaders working on the treaty were French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau and U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. These two men, both significant leaders of the process, were at stark odds with one another at the treaty table. Clemenceau sought to punish Germany for its aggression towards France, while Wilson had a more merciful vision, one that sought to convene a League of Nations to mediate international conflicts to prevent future wars. Their positions were intractable. Then Wilson became seriously ill. The disease came on so suddenly his staff first thought he was poisoned. His symptoms, including delirium, made it clear he contracted influenza. Wilson eventually recovered, but he returned to the treaty table a different man. His fight for a merciful and measured conclusion to the war went out of him. While the treaty did lead to Wilson's League of Nations, the remaining terms reflected Clemenceau's punitive aims. As one observed, the treaty essentially made Germany cease to exist. In retrospect, some wonder if Wilson's surrendering of will, likely due to his brush with death, was the turning point for the treaty's terms that set the stage for the Second World War, a war including the Holocaust and Hiroshima, the destruction of cities, and the deaths of millions of people. But Wilson was not the only leader impacted by influenza. In India, a lawyer and community organizer named Mohandas Gandhi encouraged his countrymen to aid the British during the war, believing that India's support would inspire Britain to grant India greater autonomy. Gandhi was not always a devout proponent of nonviolence. It was the Indian soldiers returning home that brought influenza to the country. Soon thousands, including Gandhi, were afflicted. Gandhi wrote to his son throughout the months of his medical odyssey. It was clear that he thought that his life was ending. "I have a feeling that I am now going," he writes. "I have very little time left. The body is becoming weaker and weaker." This reckoning with his life and his death sparked spiritual reflection, also revealed in his messages. "But my heart is at peace, and so I do not find the going at all difficult. I think whatever inheritance I am leaving to you, brothers, is appropriate. What would you have gained if I had left money? But the inheritance of character which I am leaving to you is invaluable in my view. I wish you to cherish it. Follow the path of religion." Longer excerpts from these letters will serve as today's closing reading. Gandhi believed that illness was punishment from God for wrongdoing. As he recovered, he concluded that his advocacy for entering World War I was his moral failure. Thus, his commitment to nonviolence became more resolute. And as he observed Britain's abandonment of the Indian people as millions suffered and died from influenza, the calling towards seeking home rule became clear.
These stories, lifted up by Radiolab, offer significant lessons. Two world leaders changed dramatically through the crucible of their illness. With Wilson, the physical impact of the disease weakened his drive to advance his convictions. With the other, Gandhi, the disease fostered and strengthened his beliefs, planting the seeds for his leadership of a non-violent revolution. None of us is a world leader like Gandhi or Woodrow Wilson, and yet we would be wise to heighten our awareness of how our collective reckoning with mortality, some through becoming ill, some through grief, and just trying to stay healthy, and our social isolation, how these experiences are changing us. Many have given names to this time of quarantine or near quarantine living, a time out, a forced retreat. Recalling Parker Palmer's metaphor of the wild animal, I've come to see this time as a period when our souls cannot leave the woods. Right now, we have no choice but to become ever more present to the still small voice within, and to let that voice guide us when we do show up to life, when we show up for one another and for our beautiful and broken world, when we offer authentic presence, however we may serve. In early June, as communities did across the nation, members of our congregation gathered at our corner at Main Street and Mystic Valley Parkway in Winchester to bear witness. In the words of the flyer distributed by another organization, we came for peace, unity, and justice in memory of George Floyd and all victims of systemic racism. No matter where the vigil gathered, I knew many of us in the congregation, our hearts broken, our souls enraged by the death of yet another Black American at the hands of police. We would be there. But we were honored to offer our space to the wider community so hundreds of residents could voice their vision for a different nation and to state the simple truth that Black lives matter. We were honored to provide a plot of private property that was also sacred ground. This vigil was the first time since mid-March many of us saw one another in person once we recognized each other through our masks. For most of us, this was the first and only reason we, along with so many others across our small town, took the risk of gathering in community. We had no speeches, as speakers would draw the crowd closer together on the lawn, relying only on our handheld signs. There was no chanting, as it was impossible to chant through a mask, but we needed to show up. We needed to be present. As we gathered to prepare ourselves for the strike of 8, the words of Nigerian-born poet Ben Okri came to mind. The weeks of lockdown have purified our sense of justice. They have given us time to think. For while I have joined our members in protest for racial justice many times, this was the first time our town as a community made such a collective public statement. When you come to visit Winchester, you may experience it as a quintessential New England village, but what you gain in quaint charm, you lose through silence in the name of politeness. This vigil made it clear that something had changed. As the tower chimes struck 8, a different kind of silence fell over the crowd. The growing dusk around us, we passed the light from one candle to another. Some of us bent down to take a knee. The bells faded and then started up again, this time playing tunes to hymns as collective testimony. We shall overcome. Lift every voice and sing. Across the common, could hear the bells of other churches joining in, a strange, discordant harmony. Together, we were held in this moment, this sacred moment, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the time it took George Floyd to transition from life to death at the hands of police. I did not know George Floyd personally, and yet there was this great collective need, an interfaith, almost secular way to pray for him, to pray with him, be present to him in his painful final moments through this symbolic act. Perhaps our sense of justice is being purified in this time. Perhaps our will is eroding in the face of so much challenge, illness, and change. Just remember that dwelling in the spiritual woods is like time in the biblical wilderness. We will not emerge the same. This morning, I ask all of us, how do you want to return, and to what will you be present?
Please join us in singing number 1023, Building Bridges. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
We extinguish our chalice with these excerpts from letters Gandhi wrote to his son. I have a feeling that I am going now. I have very little time left. The body is becoming weaker and weaker. I am not able to eat anything. But my heart is at peace, and so I do not find the going at all difficult. I think whatever inheritance I am leaving to your brothers is appropriate. What would you have gained if I had left money? But the inheritance of character, which I am leaving to you, is invaluable in my view. I wish you to cherish it. Follow the path of religion. I am always thinking how you may come to be at peace with yourself and remain so. If I could help you by any word of mine, and if I knew that word, I would write it at once. I do not know whether you have understood what this world means, but I have the clearest vision of it every moment. And I see it exactly as it has been described by the sages, and that so vividly that I feel no interest in it. Activity is inescapable, so long as there is this body, and therefore the only thing that pleases me is to be ever occupied with activity of the utmost purity. It is no exaggeration to say that I experience wave after wave of joy from the practice of self-restraint which such work requires. One will find true happiness in the measure that one understands this and lives accordingly. If this calamity puts you in a frame of mind in which such happiness will be yours, we may even regard it as welcome. If your mind can ever disengage itself from its concerns, ponder over all this. We are well.
Hi, I wanted to say a big thank you to Aaron Powers. During these really difficult times, while we've been having these virtual services and we've all been dealing with our stress of different types, my mom's stress and my teacher stress has been a lot at times. And I am so thankful for her diligence in really having excellent programming for all the kids at different levels, and for thinking of us parents, having parent support groups, and we can talk about our issues and share resources, and maintaining a good connection with our kids. Wyatt has really enjoyed doing different crafts and, making shrinky-dink chalices and stuff like that. And so it's keeping alive some of our traditions from church, and helping him to feel a sense of community when we talk about church, and it's really helped me. So thank you. And thank you to everybody working on the virtual services. It's such a blessing to all of us. We appreciate your hard work. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful week. Blessed be.